Hi, welcome to True Crime Talk. This is Kathleen, and in this video, I'm going to be discussing missing person Miss Dorothy Geneva Freeman, who is a female white Caucasian who went missing from Hamilton, Montana, way back in 1970, September 7th, which I believe was Labor Day. She was 26 years old at the time she went missing. If she were still alive today, she would be 80 years old. This is her NamUs profile for her. It says her height was 5'8". She was about 150 pounds. And she was missing from Hamilton, Montana, which is in Ravalli County. And I may be mispronouncing that, but Ravalli County. And it says she was last seen around 21:30 hours on September 7th, 1970, when she left Missoula en route to her student teaching job in Hamilton. So she lived in Missoula, and this is Missoula, Montana. This is a map of Montana. This is Missoula, Montana, and Hamilton is down here. So she would have left her apartment in Missoula to travel to Hamilton, or was it vice versa? Let me go back. Yeah, when she left Missoula en route to her teaching job in Hamilton. So she worked in Hamilton and she lived here. And somewhere in between her home and Hamilton, she disappeared. This is a newspaper article about her going missing from 1972, so a couple of years after she went missing. And it says, Fairfield family marks holiday without member. The Herman Grasdocks of Fairfield experienced their second holiday season without their 26-year-old daughter, who disappeared mysteriously Labor Day 1970. Mrs. Dorothy Geneva Grasdock Freeman, a student teacher attending University of Montana, drove away from her apartment in Missoula, never to be seen again by her family or known friends. She was driving a 1960 Fairlane 500 Ford four-door sedan with a Montana license number 31-315 and serial number OP42X128923. I've had my hopes up so many times, but nothing came of it. I just don't know what to think, said Mrs. Grasdock, who used to agree with her son, Orville, who believed the missing woman is suffering amnesia. I sure wonder what happened. I surely do. It's not like her to go away. Grasdock, 73, has been confined to bed since suffering a stroke August 13th, which the physician believes was induced by worry. Totally paralyzed at the time, Grasdock is beginning to regain the use of his right leg and right arm. The Grasdock sons and other daughter and their children spent Thanksgiving with their parents. We talked about it, but couldn't think of anything more to do than has already been done, said Mrs. Grasdock. I just keep taking care of my husband, and Orville keeps on with his farm work. This is an article 3 years after she went missing, from Tuesday, September 4th, 1973, from the Great Falls Tribune. And this article says, Kin of teacher who disappeared still hoping for some answer. Labor Day 1970, Dorothy Geneva Grasdock Freeman, a 26-year-old University of Montana student teacher, climbed into her automobile outside her Missoula apartment and drove into obscurity. She was to report to Hamilton the next morning for a teaching job, but she never arrived. Some say she was seen that next afternoon at a Wisdom Cafe 74 miles southeast of Hamilton. Others report she was spotted the following day in a cafe at Wise River, East Wisdom, and again later that day back in the Wisdom area. A heavy equipment operator in Beaverhead County said he observed Mrs. Freeman driving along Montana Highway 43 between Wisdom and Wise River. If it was Mrs. Freeman, it was the last she would ever be seen. The 39 miles of paved road connecting Wisdom with Wise River is not a widely traveled highway. The lonely asphalt stretch sidesteps the Big Horn River and is bordered by the Beaverhead National Forest and the Anaconda Pentlar Wilderness Area. Despite a ground and air search by authorities and a nationwide police teletype alert, no trace of the woman or her automobile was found. The mysterious disappearance has taken its toll on Mrs. Freeman's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Herman Grasdock of Fairfield. Her father spent his weekends driving the back roads in the Hamilton, Wisdom, and Wise River area. He also hired a helicopter and searched the Caiho Pass area between Hamilton and Anaconda. For Grasdock, the search ended in August 1972 when he suffered a stroke which physicians believe was induced by worry. Now 74 and paralyzed, he is confined to the Teton County Nursing Home in Chateau. It's all kind of odd, said Mrs. Grasdock Monday. With all these kidnappings going on, you kind of wonder if that's what has happened. Vera Grasdock, sister-in-law of Mrs. Freeman, said she didn't believe the woman was capable of disappearing without notifying the family. We thought at first she might have just gone off to be by herself, she said, but after 3 years we don't think so. She described her sister-in-law as a quiet, reserved woman who decided to go to college in 1968 after learning her husband, stationed with the Air Force in Thailand, wanted a divorce. She was concerned about her divorce and several other things, Mrs. Grasdock said, but she wasn't the type of person to just take off and never let us know. Mrs. Freeman is described as 5 feet 8, 150 pounds, with fair skin, blue eyes, and brown hair. At the time of her disappearance, she was driving a 1980 Fairlane 500 Ford four-door sedan with Montana license number 31-315 and identification serial number OP42X128923. Everybody would like to know what happened to Dorothy, said Mrs. Grasdock. If we just knew one way or the other, it would relieve a lot of tension and worry. We still hope that someday something will turn up one way or the other. And there's her picture again. That's Dorothy Freeman right there. Just a side note here, this is the Find a Grave website, and it has Dorothy's father's death and burial information here. So he did indeed end up passing away in 1974. I guess not long after the newspaper article was written. So he died at the age of 74 in 1974. Her father, Lars Herman Grasdock. And it gives his memorial, but it does say a daughter, Dorothy, disappeared September 7th, 1970, and has not been heard from since. So he ended up dying, and her going missing probably did cause him a lot of stress and worry. So that very well could have contributed to his stroke and then his death in 1974. But her mother, let me see if I can find her mother. Okay, here we go. Her mother, Gertrude Elizabeth Spolder Grasdock, she lived until 1991. So she died not knowing what happened to her daughter either, and she lived to age 85. So let's say Dorothy did voluntarily run off. Today she would be 80, so it is possible she could still be alive if she did voluntarily run off. And in her mother's memorial on findagrave.com, it also talks about her daughter. Let's see. She was preceded in death by her mother in 1918 and her father in 1937, three brothers, Herman, Henry, and Anthony Spolder. A daughter, Dorothy, has been missing since 1970. So both her father, when he died in 1974, his newspaper memorial, and her mother's in 1991, they both mentioned their daughter. They didn't say they believed her to be deceased. They just used the word missing. So I guess they always kept a little bit of hope that maybe she was out there somewhere. She just decided to leave for whatever reason. So I just wanted to share that for two reasons. One, to know that her parents, unfortunately died without knowing what happened to their daughter. But also, it is possible that if Dorothy did voluntarily leave, that she could technically still be alive today because she'd be 80, and a lot of people live to their 80s and 90s. So it's possible that she could still be out there if she chose to start a new life. And she went missing in 1970, so it would have been a lot easier to, start a new life back then without people being able to find you. Although you think over the years, as technology changes, that somebody would eventually have picked up, if her social security number was used or something like that. And I looked up the car that she was driving, the 1960 Fairlane 500 Ford four-door sedan. And this information says a 1964 Fairlane 500 four-door sedan is a full-size car that was part of Ford's Fairlane lineup, known for its various body styles and trim levels. It featured options like a V8 engine and was popular for its spacious interior and classic design. And then here's some pictures of it. So I don't know what color her car was because it wasn't in the newspaper articles that I read, unless I just missed it. But here's cars that were similar to what she was driving when she went missing, but I don't know what color her car was or exactly what trim her car had. But this is what the Ford Fairlane 1960 vehicle looked like. And so it leaves you to wonder, oh, I miss some old kind of cars. Look at all that space and room. It leaves you to wonder, could she have been met with foul play while driving along the road? Could she have broke down or had a flat tire and came upon a stranger, an opportunistic criminal? Because she had met up with a serial killer like a Ted Bundy or somebody like that. I'm not saying Ted Bundy was in Montana at the time she went missing. I'm just saying that something like that, somebody like a Ted Bundy. Or the other option would be that she went down off a cliff or went into a body of water. But to this day, her car nor her has ever been found or seen or heard from again. But the area where she went missing is a rugged area as far as the roadways back then. But to this day, they have found no trace of her vehicle. So if she did go off a cliff or is in a body of water, you think maybe they would have found it over time when they were doing construction work or redoing the roads and stuff. Because the roads are still rugged today, from my understanding, but back then they would have been even more rugged and I believe a lot of dirt roads, the back roads that she would have traveled on and stuff like that. So I assume, but you never know because after many, many years, some people are found in water. I assume though that over the years that they did check bodies of water, they did check, the roadways that they thought that she had traveled on and checked out the areas where there were supposed sightings. And I don't know if the sightings are necessarily true, just people who thought they may have seen her. I don't think it's like, she was seen by people who actually knew her. Could have just, the police let people know that somebody's missing and then people call in tips or whatever, but they may not have actually seen who they thought they had seen. They may not have actually seen Dorothy. They could have seen somebody else, but let the police know that they thought they saw her at a certain cafe, but it wasn't her. Or if it was, she could have been, stopped to eat for whatever reason on her way to work. It's my understanding that she was on her way to work, like in the morning. But then I read somewhere that it was at night. So if it was dark when she was traveling, there had been more likely that she could have been involved in an accident and went off a roadway over a cliff down a hill and her car was never found yet, or into a body of water and her car was never found. But if that is not what happened to her, okay, the options are she left voluntarily, she left to go somewhere to harm herself, or she met with foul play. Well, I'm going to rule out she left voluntarily because she left, like I read in researching this case, she had food in her freezer, she had money in her bank. If she's going to leave to start a new life, she would have took her money with her. And from everything I researched about her, she was not the kind of person who would just leave her family. That, she was going through a divorce and all that, but that she was, in college, she was fixing to become a teacher. She had everything in the world to look forward to, and that people thought, well, she could have went off for a day or two to take a trip, but she wouldn't have missed work. She wouldn't have not came back home. So I don't think that's what happened here in this case. And then the other one is that she went off to harm herself. I don't think that happened either because her body nor her car has ever been found. Now, if she purposely drove off a cliff or drove into a body of water to harm herself, well, that could be maybe why her vehicle has not been found, but I don't see that as happening here because, like I said, she had everything to look forward to. So she had no reason to harm herself or no reason to go start off a new life and just leave her family, whole family behind. She come from a big family. She came from a big family. So my best guess, if it was probably an accident and she just hasn't been found, because that happens. People go missing, they die in an accident, and for whatever reason their bodies and their vehicles, even though their vehicles are big and lots of metal, you think it would be found over time. They're just not found because they're in bodies of water, or they're way off, down in a like a rugged mountain area, and they're just not found. So I'm thinking it's either going to be an accident and her car has just not been found, or foul play. And foul play could be, maybe she stopped at a cafe to eat or something, or she's a woman traveling alone on very secluded highways. This, rural area of Montana, the roadways that she was traveling on, to my understanding, were very rural and rugged. She's traveling alone. Like I said, if she broke down, she could have met with foul play from somebody who stopped to supposedly help her, but they ended up either, carjacking her, taking her in a car somewhere. She could have been, it could have been like a pervert, a criminal pervert who, saw a woman traveling alone and took the opportunity, or it could have been somebody, a robber, a criminal, a thief who wanted her car. They could have stole her car and then killed her and dumped her body somewhere. Or, like, my only other thing is she just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time and met up with a serial killer who was looking for victims. But that's the only things that I can think that happened. I don't, to my understanding, her case has nothing to do with her husband or ex-husband, soon to be ex-husband, or current ex-husband, because he was in Thailand when she went missing. They were not together at all. So, and he was not in America. So unless he had somebody do something for him, he was not involved at all, to my knowledge. So my best bet, and I want to know what other people think. I read over some Reddit and web sleuth things, and that's, most people seem to think that she's probably in a body of water or down like an embankment, a big mountain embankment or something. They said where she went missing is like a lot of, and I'm not familiar with the area. I'm not familiar with Montana. I've never been to Montana, but like there's a lot of rocky cliffs and stuff, and that she could have just accidentally drove over a cliff if she was, like sleepy, or she just had an accident for whatever reason, and that her car would just never be been found, even after all this time, even like as things change and they do road work or whatever construction work, that it could be possible that she has still never been found after all these years, even if she went missing in a big old car like what we're looking at here on the screen. So that is possible. But she lived in Missoula and she was on her way to Hamilton. And apparently, in between these two places, she was spotted by a couple of witnesses. But then she just disappeared and hasn't been seen since. Okay, going back to the NamUs website, the National Missing and Unidentified Person System website, it does say the color of her car. It says her 1960 Ford Fairmont sedan was white and green. So it's a white and green colored car. And she obviously wore glasses, as you can see in her picture. And if you have any information about her case at all, you can contact the Ravalli County Sheriff's Office at 406-375-4061. And again, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that name. Is there Ravalli County Sheriff's in Montana? And that's all the information I have about her case. It's from 1970. I will say was odd. They have for her left eye color is blue and her right eye color is black. But I think they were actually both blues. Could be a mistake on here. I don't know if she had some kind of eye issue. It's not very specific. But she did wear glasses, so maybe she did have some kind of eye thing. She had soft, wavy, curly hair, neck length, brown hair. But other than that, she was last seen around 21:30 hours on September 7th of 1970 when she left Missoula en route to her student teaching job in Hamilton. That's all the information I have. Other than that, there were a few sightings back then, but I couldn't find more specific details about the sightings or who saw her and exactly where they saw her in relation from where she lived to where Hamilton, where she was supposedly going, is. Okay, one more thing before I end this video. On the NamUs website, it says a 1960 Ford Fairmont, and I just realized that the car that supposedly she was driving was a 1960 Ford Fairlane when she went missing in 1970. I don't believe the Fairmont was even produced at the time she went missing. I don't think it had been produced yet. She went missing. The car that she went missing in was a 1960 Ford Fairlane. I believe this information on NamUs to be inaccurate. I think the information that we read in the newspaper articles was the correct information. That was closer to the time she actually went missing. This information was entered, years later, and I think somebody made a typo or a mistake. It says Ford Fairmont, but I believe I showed you the pictures of a Ford Fairlane, that was indeed the car that she went missing in, because to my understanding, a Fairmont wasn't even produced yet. And so whether this information that the car was white and green is accurate, I don't know. But I believe most of the other information should be accurate on this page. She did go missing on September 7th, 1970 from Hamilton, Montana, and she was 26 years old. And that's her picture right there.